Mount Cook. At 3,754 metres, it towers above the rest of the Southern Alps. As many as 200 climbers attempt the ascent every year. The majority don't make it. The most beautiful day can quickly become a raging storm, and even the most experienced climbers can be caught out. And so it was in 1982. Two young members of the Mount Cook Search and Rescue Team, out on a familiarisation climb, were caught in a sudden storm. So began the biggest alpine search the country had ever seen. The mountain ordeal was over, but life would never be the same. Neither fully appreciated what lay ahead.
What we were seeing was half a foot that was likely to be lost. To actually understand that you had to lose it, you know, sort of 5.5 inches below the knee, that was probably one of the hardest things to understand.
It would be a long, hard road to recovery.
One of the best things was the registrar came in just before it, and I'd asked him for honest opinion. He said, "Look, this is something that's going to take you years to get over. It's not something that you're going to be up and running around in 6 months. Something that's going to take a lot longer, and you've got to be prepared for doing the hard yards." And that was the best advice I think I'd ever had.
In fact, it would be the best part of 20 years before Mark Inglis would once again set foot on Aoraki Mount Cook.
Really quite early on, I thought, well, let's look for something else.
Mark Joseph Inglis, first class honours in biochemistry.
I did my honours through the School of Medicine, and I ended up as a research scientist, as a scientific officer, working in medicine and haematology and leukemia, and that was, it's hugely satisfying. That
satisfaction lasted 5 years. Then it was time for another change, a new career, a new challenge as a winemaker in Marlborough.
Oh yeah, there's always the legless winemaker jokes. Occasionally been true as well, I can tell you.
Mountain climber, academic, scientist, winemaker, businessman, and now elite athlete. Specially built high-tech legs have allowed Mark to excel in his sport.
Excellent racing by Mark Inglis. Big crowd here to support him from the Kiwi camp. So double-amputee Mark Inglis wins New Zealand's first medal at these 11th Paralympics. Silver medal in the 1K time trial. He really is an inspiration. And he gets the thrill of receiving his medal from Juan Antonio Samaranch, President of the International Olympic Committee.
Nothing holds Mark Inglis back. The 20-year wait is nearly over.
It was fantastic flying in that first time, knowing that I was going to go climbing, flying in with Charlie, just seeing the route, that was amazing. And stepping out of that chopper on plateau was just like coming home, it just feels so natural. Especially knowing that, you're going to climb in the next few days, to get a sense and a feel of the mountain again. Everything that happened in the last 20 years, everything that happened in the last year, the Paralympics, the December climb, the family, everything. They say when you die, your life flashes in front of your eyes. For me, my life flashed in front of my eyes in that 30 metres. It was one of the most magical things I've done. I was pretty tired on the top, but it was just totally overwhelmed, really.
There were two grown men crying on the summit of Mount Cook that day.
Mark Inglis, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the UKAsian. Welcome to London, I guess. First of all, tell us a little bit about what you're doing in London.
I'm here to present tomorrow afternoon, to about 400 accountants, actually, from South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. Accountants are great, yeah, because, they need a lot of inspiration, when you're doing that sort of job, yeah. And so it's, I spend a lot of my time actually working in financial institutions and the likes, working on change management, but a lot of it working on attitude, and so, yeah.
What are the kind of things that you're going to be talking about tomorrow?
Tomorrow, in some ways I tell my story, but probably sort of flip it around and use the lessons I've learned in my corporate life, use the lessons I've learned in my mountaineering life, and use excerpts from some of the many things I've been privileged to do to illustrate them. A lot around change management, a lot around attitude, a lot around personal responsibility, and the understanding of a true team, and the whole concept of, you'll always hear people say, there's no I in team. Well, there isn't, but there's a me, an ME in team. And it's a very,
if you look hard enough, yes.
It is,
absolutely.
but it's a very important part of what we do, and that's called personal responsibility. Because if you don't have that, a team doesn't function.
I mean, I met you about an hour ago, and already there's a very kind of positive vibe about you. You exude a certain optimism, a certain positivity. Now, yours is a quite an extraordinary story. 1982 was the accident. Were you always positive? Were you always a kind of an optimistic person, or a go-getter, as it were?
Well, I think if you went to talk to any of my climbing friends, because I was a professional climber, professional search and rescue mountaineer back in 1982, when I had, when I got stuck for 13 days in that ice cave, had my frostbite, had my legs cut off. If you went and talked to any of my friends that knew me back then, they'll go, it's still the same Mark. The only thing you have cut off is your legs, okay? You don't have your intellect or your soul removed. You just have some feet removed. And as long as you can see it as being opening the doors to a new opportunity in life. And I always tell people that the best person to ever have their legs cut off at 23 is a young mountaineer. Because, I'd been climbing since I'd been 12. And as a young mountaineer, you're putting yourself in positions where if you don't do something, you might die. And so you become a very proactive person. Yeah. And so all I got given was a new challenge to be proactive.
So 1982, and then there was a 19-year gap before you actually climbed Mount Cook again. Well, that was 19 years. Yep. Tell me about that interim and how your mentality developed. What was it like immediately afterwards? The kind of emotions that you went through, and the transition from that into your current state of mind.
Well, the state of mind really hasn't changed a lot. It's all about learning about the situation you're in. And I really did have the vision that, I had my legs cut off on Christmas Eve, 1982. And so Christmas Day wasn't so good. I thought it would be a lot better, but it wasn't so good. And it was that understanding that, I thought I knew what it was going to be like, but you have no idea until it actually happens to you. And so it took a while to understand that, but as soon as you get to understand that, then it frees your mind up to look for opportunity. But it's about learning. It's about learning about and being proactive about the situation. It took me 19 years to go back to climb Mount Cook, but it was 19 years of learning, 19 years of, I started climbing straight away and I couldn't do it well enough. So I thought, well, actually, let's go and do something else. Paralympic skiing, cycling at the Paralympics with my medal in Sydney in 2000. And it's all just increasing that learning base and increasing the view. And it was then that I knew that I could do it. I never wanted to go back on a mountain without being able to do everything myself. If you go to a mountain and you expect someone to give you a hand up, you should not be there. And I'm a bit hard-nosed about that. I don't want to push someone up a mountain in a wheelchair. If you want to go up a mountain in a wheelchair, you
do it yourself.
Do it yourself. And so I wasn't confident enough until 2001, 2002.
But the Olympics were, well, that must have been an incredible experience.
The
right
Olympics
next door
are
to
fun.
home as well, isn't it?
Oh, they're fun. It's they're such a challenge, but cycling's such a challenge, and cycling at the Olympic level is such a challenge. And the thing that you learn is that cycling is one of the world's most difficult sports, because you have to have.
You're not just going round and round in circles.
Yeah, you're not going round and round in circles. You're actually having to push yourself to your absolute limit and beyond anything that you thought you could do. And the toughest thing is that at any time when you're cycling, you can just sit up and stop. And the pain stops, the hurt stops, you know. When you're up a mountain, you know, when you're in a situation like that, you can't stop. And so in some ways mountaineering's easy, because you can't stop, so you have to keep going.
Say that, but
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. And so for me, the learning and the discipline from the cycling and the training really helped a huge amount. Yep.
And 2007 was Everest.
2006.
Was that something that
15th of May.
Was that something that you had actually planned all your life? I mean, is that something that you thought about as a mountaineer all your life, and you know, how much preparation went?
Well, as a young New Zealand mountaineer, you have to do Everest. You know, Sir Edmund Hillary did it, so you have to do it. You just, it's a bit like if you're a young New Zealand rugby player, you have to aim for the All Blacks.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like to say if you're a young cricketer, you'd aim for the Black Cats, but yeah, you know, sometimes they don't do so well. But it's very much ingrained, and you know, everyone knew I would do Everest, but it just took me a wee bit longer.
Yeah. When was the question, not if.
Yeah.
And you know, something that's come up in my research as well, the whole issue of David Sharp. That's kind of. Do you think that's coloured your this incredible achievement of becoming the first double amputee to scale Everest? Has that coloured your achievement? Because it's something that especially the media tend to kind of latch on to, isn't it? And how have you dealt with that?
Oh, absolutely. You know, my climb of Everest will never be divorced from one unfortunate young Briton that died on the mountain that day, that no one could do anything for. And I guess for the last 7 years now, a lot of what I'm doing is interpreting the challenge of Everest. Interpreting for people that you cannot buy your way up Everest. You can buy your opportunity, but Everest still has the ability to kill you. And it's to paint the picture of how incredibly difficult it is, but it's also to paint the picture of the decisions that you need to make and the understanding of how you get to those decisions. A lot of the work that I do in the corporate world is around decision making, around understanding how do we make decisions, how do you use sometimes constrained information, and about going back to your first principles, about understanding your goals, all those things. You know, we learnt a lot from 1996. You know, I lost two very good friends on the 12th of May in 1996, Andy and Rob. They both died on the slopes of Everest. And we learnt so much about professionalism on Everest. We learnt so much about giving your own life away for no reason. And it was a lot of those learnings that we had to have ingrained in our mind on that very tough day.
And you've turned that incident into a part of your own kind of teachings in the corporate world, haven't you? You've kind of analysed it, and you've taken certain things from that, the lessons you've learned from that, and turned that into part of your kind of training.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, very much so. And one of the really interesting things is, you know, I've done a lot of work in India, and in India, there's a real thirst for the understanding of how do you make those decisions. You know, how do you use a tight team? How do you use personal responsibility in that team? because they are the decisions that many of the businesses are needing to make, to change, to streamline, to flatten their corporate structures, to make them even more competitive in the world market. And it's those sorts of learnings that I can take in and apply. You know, I'm very lucky to have had a corporate life as well, and so to be able to merge those two things in together. You know, it's the decisions that we make on the mountain aren't about winning or losing a deal. It's about winning or losing a life, and it's the understanding of those. And you know, it's been a great opportunity.
What was the catalyst? What was the moment where you thought, you know, you've lived this extraordinary life, I can now translate this into helping people, particularly in the corporate world and in the field of leadership and entrepreneurship and all of that? What was the moment that you knew that you could kind of transition that?
Oh, probably all the way back before I lost my legs, actually, when I was a young search and rescue mountaineer at Mount Cook. And it's this beautiful mountain park in New Zealand, and school groups would come up. And they'd stand there and look at the mountain. I'm going, no, don't look just at the mountain. Look at your feet. Look at the beautiful gentians and the mountain buttercups growing at your feet. And it was the thirst to interpret the things I love. And so that's something I've always done in mountaineering, and in my winemaking, in my as a scientist. The thing I love doing is interpreting that. And I guess since Everest, it's a bit like people seeing wine wrong, seeing Everest wrong, seeing the mountains wrong. It is trying to interpret for them and open their eyes to the reality of it. Yeah.
And you do a lot of work in India as well, especially in the corporate world. Why India? I mean, is that something that you kind of drawn into, or that you were drawn to India? Why India?
A combination of both. I saw India as a real opportunity. Most businesses is done in English in lots of different ways, and so I didn't need an interpreter. Well, actually, I do, because I speak Kiwi, not English. Yeah. So right. You know, I've had to learn to speak somewhat slower, but I sort of...
I'm struggling right at this moment, but...
Yeah, I know. That's all right. I've got a lot of stories around that. I can tell you, some of them being published in the Times of India, about when I get my language wrong. But for me, India just is... it's such a powerhouse in the world, you know? But it's also a place of incredible change. And it's a place of great thirst of knowledge, and very aspirational people. And I just saw this incredible opportunity. I tried quite early on. In fact, my first job in India was supposed to be just 2 or 3 days after that tragedy in November of 2008.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like, And it wasn't until I met Raga and Nicola, my business partners in Red Hot Murchie Global, you know, they were able to help take me to India and help me interpret my message. And that for me, and that for us, has actually been incredibly powerful. We've done, you know, well over 100 presentations with the biggest companies in India, with all sorts of different people, from steel workers in the middle of Karnataka to the boards of the most senior people. And the message is really comes down to the same. It's that thirst for knowledge, but in India, it's the appreciation that if you're going to tell me something, show me what you've done. And that for me has been very positive.
What is the kind of in the first instance, what is the distance between your own definition of leadership and where India is at the moment in terms of leadership? Is there a huge divergence, or is that something that India needs to do a lot more to work towards? Leadership in your definition.
For me, I've learned a lot about leadership with some of the people that I've worked with in India, with Ratan Tata, with Chandrakutra, with Ram Kumar, with some marvellous people.
Chandrakutra of ICICI Bank,
Yeah.
Ratan Tata,
Yeah. So for me, we all have the same vision, okay? But it's sharing that vision down through the structures. It's sharing that vision so we can bring the structures down. It is the understanding of the division between leadership and management. Okay? In a lot of traditional businesses, they're still very much management orientated, whereas they need to be, and the real thirst and the drive is for them to become leadership orientated. And they're very different things. And so it's...
what is the key difference between the two?
The key difference is anyone can learn management from a book. You bring leadership to the table with you. You can learn leadership, but it is about a spiritual growing within yourself. It is about an understanding and a learning. It is about a valuing of everyone, and it's bringing everyone along with you. Management is the manual. Yeah.
And making sure everybody sticks to the manual.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah, but it's also about changing the manual as you go along. You know, and it's leadership that brings the people along. It's about being at the head of the tail of the comet. You know, just bringing everyone along, and you know that's what the great leaders do.
Who are some of the great leaders you've met in India?
Probably the one that I remember the most was Ratan Tata. You know, and I met him at a time at the changeover with Cyrus Mystery as well. I meet a lot of very famous people around the world, and quite often when you meet someone, I'm only a wee guy in the world, okay? And these people, they look over you, and they look around, you know, and every now and then they'll go, oh yes, you're still there, and they'll look around. When you see great leaders like Mr. Tata, he'll look you in the eye, and he'll hold you in the eye, and you walk away feeling that you've been incredibly valued. And for me, that was one of the great lessons. You know, it's you need to value everyone from all the way down. You know, and you need to be able to connect with them as well. And if you can do that, you're a great leader.
And that's one of the essential qualities of being a great leader.
Very much so.
Give me two more.
No.
You know.
For me, there have been so many. I worked with a small software company based in Hyderabad, and the CEO, when he walked in, was in board shorts, you know, and surfboard shorts. No one in this company of 600 people wore suits. At any one time, only 40% of the people were in the building, and the rest were able to work from home. And one of the things that they did was they defined everyone's job by the project they needed to complete, not by the hours they needed to be there, not by the 6-minute billing or 15-minute billing or anything else. And you see that and you go, wow. And I said to him, I said, oh, how do people that come from, you know, because a lot of Indian businesses are really quite structured. And I said, how do some of the people that you're bringing in, how do they react? And they said they react fantastically well. The big problem is that, as we all know, young people want to move around to get experience. You know, they'll move to another company, but we never have to worry because we know they'll always come back. Because the big problem they have is when they move away, back into a tightly structured organisation, they'll realise the incredible value they had back. They'll learn something and they come back. And so, you know, those sorts of things were a great learning.
What are the kind of challenges that India faces as it kind of tries to, you know, you've got this incredible economic growth. There is also relatively speaking at least, there is a dearth of leadership in kind of trying to shepherd this massive country and massively divergent country into the ideal path. What are the challenges it faces, do you think, in terms of leadership at the moment?
I think the challenges come right down to the individual and in personal responsibility, about empowering people all the way up through an organisation of having responsibility for what they do. One of the challenges that I see in India and other places in the world, it's just not India at all, is that you can give your responsibility away to someone else. You know, the blame game. Just look at any newspaper in India. You know, it'll be full of the blame game. You know, we all know it. And it's to get away from the blame game and learn the lessons. Okay? The smart businesses are doing it, and I think we'll see. I do a lot of work with change management in companies, you know, and you know I've done it from my days in winemaking all the way through. And we always say that we can change a company's culture in probably 3 to 6 years. You know, with intensive work, with good leaders, developing good leaders, building leadership. In India, I think it will be generational. It's such a huge place.
Yeah.
It has such huge history. It's bringing, I call it the gravity of change. In a small culture, where I'm from New Zealand, a very recent culture, there's not so much gravity. Okay, there's not so much pull of gravity. In India, 1.3 billion, there's a lot of pull of gravity. In the thousands of years of history and the recent millennia, there's a lot of gravity to overcome. And it's those young people coming up through the universities, the aspirational people. They're the people that will help change it. But it's not an overnight thing. It is for some companies, but for a lot, because of the size of some of them, you know, companies of 1 and 200,000 staff, that's a lot of gravity to overcome. And so that's what I try and do is throw my rupee in to try and help change and increase the pace of that change, reduce that gravity.
What about disability in India, and you know how it's perceived, how it's treated? What were your first impressions and thoughts when you first got there, and you know how have things changed in the very, very few years you've actually been there? What about disability in India?
It's still a real challenge. I have a charity called Limbs for All, and when I look at India, I go, we're too small. Okay, the charity I work a lot in Nepal and Cambodia, but a lot of the work that I do in charity with disability isn't about giving people wheelchairs or giving people limbs. The thing I see far more valuable is giving people an attitude. Okay, you need to understand that as long as you've got access to a resource, that's a wheelchair, a leg, physiotherapy, whatever it is, if you've got access, then you've got opportunity in life. But the disabled need to understand that, but even more importantly, the whole community needs to understand that. And at the moment in India, because for many people are too poor, they might not have the access to the resources. That's changing rapidly. You have fantastic limb fitters in India, great prosthetics industry, great access now to wheelchairs and the likes. The unfortunate thing is if you're in Mumbai in a wheelchair, where are you going to go? Not many places, you know? And so there needs to be a real drive to understand that you need to open it up, you need to be able to give people opportunity. And so you can't expect them to get up there in a wheelchair, you need to put a ramp in, okay? Simple things like that. In India, I hear a great deal of what I call good speak. In India, I see in the newspapers ever since I've been going there and well before, they talk about differently abled.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay?
Is that a phrase that you support?
It's a phrase that I love, because that's what I am, you
Yeah.
know. I'm not disabled, you know. I just have an opportunity to live life in a different way because I have, you know, a good set of legs. You know, they're not world-class legs. Mine are very basic legs.
I'd say you were advancedly abled. I mean, you know,
But that's purely
just coming up the
because...
stairs downstairs. But anyway,
But that's purely because of attitude, okay? And that is, I see everything as an opportunity. I don't see it as a reason not to do anything. I just see it as a reason going, oh, you have to try a bit harder at that.
Yeah.
And that's what both the disabled need to learn, but even more importantly, the community needs to learn. I've worked with some great businesses in India that have differently abled people embedded in them, and they're doing fantastically well because you know, they have so much to offer. They might not be as mobile as someone else, but hey, we've still got a brain, you know, and it's such a powerful thing. It's in Bangalore, I've seen some great IT businesses that go out and they go to people with cerebral palsy or spina bifida or paraplegia, things like that, and they go, look, we'll open up our workplace to make sure that you can get around as long as you give us the power of your mind. And it works so well. India's got a long way to go, but so too many other places in the world, okay? But it really comes down to that whole community think that, hey, as long as we've got the resources, we've just found ourselves a new asset and they have a new opportunity.
It's not all kind of work in mountaineering and, you know, corporate conferences. You're an accomplished winemaker and a Scotch connoisseur, I heard, here as well. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, is that something that you've always done, or is that a recent, the wine thing at least?
Oh, the wine thing was really interesting. When I was young, my first job was at a search and rescue mountaineer at New Zealand's premier park at Mount Cook, and they have this fantastic hotel there, you know, the Hermitage, and it was way back in the late 70s and early 80s, and it was before New Zealand discovered wine. And so this is a hotel that was world class, and they had a world class wine cellar. And so as a young mountaineer, every time you'd do an ascent, you'd go to have dinner there, and you opened your eyes to these fantastic wines from around the world. And after I lost my legs, I had no other education, so I went back to school, went to university, discovered my love of science, and got a first class honours degree in human biochemistry, and I was working as a scientist. And one day I opened up a newspaper, and there in front of me was an advert for a job as a winemaker. And they said, we'll train you. All you need is a good science degree, life experience, and I had both of those, and a passion for wine, and I had that. And I was able to step into the world of wine. I spent 10 years at Montana Wines in New Zealand, New Zealand's largest wine company. Rose to for the last 3 years as the senior winemaker there. I've done 5 or 6 years of consulting since I left. It's the thrill of doing something new. Yeah, I'm the world's worst employee, okay? Because I'm a 54-year-old that has attention deficit syndrome. You know, it's don't make me do the same thing every time for 20 times. As soon as I learn something, I go, okay, what now? You know, what can we do new? And that's what winemaking is. Every season it's completely different. There are new challenges. Sure, the same structure in the middle is the same, but everything around it changes. And so it's this continuous challenge. And, you know, challenge is the essence of life.
Do you ever get cynical at all? I mean, is there a cynical bone in your body?
Oh, yeah.
Do you
I'm a terrible cynic. Yeah.
What makes you the most cynical? What are you most cynical about?
Politics. I get cynical about people that talk about things that they have no experience of. You know, that makes me very cynical. I get very cynical about people that don't know the difference between simple words like the difference between I can't and I won't. You know, it's the understanding of that. You know, it's those sorts of things that that make me a very difficult husband and a very difficult father to live with. But,
I can imagine. You're a tough father too.
Yeah. Well, actually, the great thing for my kids, actually, because for a lot of successful parents, their kids get put in the limelight and they need to perform like their parent. Okay, my kids are very, very lucky because I'm a double amputee and they aren't, and so they've been very lucky. They can live their own lives, they have their own passions, and they're all doing fantastically well in what they do.
Into mountaineering?
None of them are into mountaineering. They're into all different sorts of things, but by the same token, they don't need to follow in my footsteps because they're not double amputees, and that has been a great freedom for them. And it's, yeah.
Just finally, just alluding to your point about politics and leadership and India, who's the better leader, Rahul Gandhi or Narendra Modi?
You're not catching me out with that one. It's for me, Indian politics is the swirling whirlpool that heads pop up and drop down and pop up and drop down. And for me, it's just...
Who would you spend the most number of hours lecturing about leadership to, Rahul or Narendra Modi?
I don't know, because I don't know either of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Personally, I think you need to stick some of your great cricketers in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you need to do. Yeah, I mean, well, Sachin, Tendulkar's, he's cracked his 100, so he doesn't need to do that anymore.
Yeah.
A few of those people.
I know you've met Rahul Dravid as well.
Yeah, Rahul Dravid's fantastic. Yeah.
Good leader?
I think he's a great leader, and I love what he's doing.
He had a tough time as a captain, though.
Yeah, he did, but what he's doing with the rest of his life is very, very positive. It's those guys. We can learn a lot from them. Yeah.
Mark Inglis, thank you for bringing some positivity to very cynical and dreary London. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.